Another thing you and I have been talking about for this past week, and I find it very interesting, and I will give anyone credit when they're doing what I believe is the right thing, and I think you believe is the right thing. There's a big story, in Massachusetts about the state auditor, Diana DiZoglio, and she wants to run an audit on the state legislature, and there's a lot of pushback. So, in the issue of transparency for everyone watching, I'm going to play a video clip. On the video clip, I took three separate clips from the TV show I got them from, and I edited them around just to make it easier to understand what the situation is. We're going to include the original links to the videos in the comments below, so you can watch them without me cutting them up, just to make sure, like, oh, Justin's just trying to get a certain type of narrative going. That's not what it is. I think the way I spliced it and put it together will hopefully give people a more concise, a clear understanding of what's going on. And if you do have issues, or you do have questions, or you do want to comment on how I made that video, yeah, please feel free to reach out, because again, I think Jimmy and I, and Jimmy would agree, we want to have a show that's trying to be as honest and factual with the information we have all the time. So if anyone ever thinks that, hey, listen, you're misrepresenting this, you're trying to hide facts, you're obfuscating things, listen, reach out to us. If you have comments, comment. We'll answer them. I'll even have you on the show and have a discussion. I don't claim to know everything. Jimmy doesn't claim to know everything. Do you?
Absolutely.
All right, good. So, but again, what we're trying to do is, based on the information we have, present what we believe and give our opinions based on it. So let me get this video going. We'll probably stop it a couple times after you listen to it. Jimmy and I will discuss it. And here we go.
Deals behind closed doors on how tax dollars are spent, what bills are passed, who's leading committees, even who's getting the best office assignments on Beacon Hill.
Lawmakers on Beacon Hill aren't subject to the public records law. Much of the business is done behind closed doors. Well, today, Auditor Diana DiZoglio sent this letter to the House Speaker and the Senate President, putting them on notice she wants to audit the legislature for what she believes will be the first time in 100 years.
As state auditor, she explained in our one-on-one interview why she has sent this letter to the House Speaker and Senate President, telling them she intends to audit the Massachusetts legislature.
Being in the legislature for 10 years really gave me the opportunity to see the dire need that we here in the state of Massachusetts do have regarding the need for increased transparency, accountability, and equity, not just outside of Beacon Hill, but right here on Beacon Hill.
What could you audit with the legislature?
We can look at transparency, accountability, and equity as it pertains to procurement, as it pertains to the budget, as it pertains to committee assignments, so on and so forth. And we do plan on taking a deep dive.
The auditor's office, the state watchdog, regularly audits more than 200 state agencies, but hasn't touched the legislature in decades.
There's nothing in the statute that prohibits us from auditing the legislature.
If there's resistance, are you prepared for a court fight?
If there is resistance, we would have that conversation.
All right. So really quick, for people who don't understand what's going on, basically they believe in probably about 100 years was the last time an audit was done. Now, there was some new information that came out today, so on next week's show, we're going to have more of that information, but we'll base our discussion on what we know right now. The last time an audit was done on a state legislature was 100 years ago. Now, this is something that I don't want to say affects me personally, but kind of does, because when I was running for office, and you try finding like opposition research on your opponent, so I started to look at her voting record, and I realized that the legislature voted on a lot of bills to reduce transparency. If you're a representative, you should be representing your people, and if you're doing the right things, I don't think you should have anything to hide. So what do you think so far, Jim?
Yeah, and I love. It's funny how you ended it on the Senate President picture there, Karen Spilka, because I mean this is exactly the issue. It's like Massachusetts has become more of a one-party state, and I think it's emboldened Democrats to get away with a lot more than they typically would if there was a bipartisanship in the legislature. So earlier this year, we saw the Senate vote to give Karen Spilka essentially unlimited term limits. The Senate president had term limits. The the Senate, which is majority Democrats, voted to get rid of term limits in for the Senate leadership. So it's Democrats over the last few years have become more emboldened given the one party control. And this is interesting because this is like she's coming in and she's at least giving the perception of, hey, you know, we're gonna investigate ourselves. Whether that actually accumulates to anything is left to be determined.
Sure. So before you go on, it was funny how you say like emboldened or whatever, because in the next minute or two of this video, it'd be interesting thing for people to watch what their representative, their elective officials believe about their positions. And, you know, as a chief in the military, you see a lot of people who, when they get power, sometimes it goes to the head and they don't know how to use it, or they use it in a way like, I am a leader, I lead you, you are too dumb to know what's going on, so I need to do everything. And we need to change that dynamic, right? A representative is called a representative. You're supposed to represent your people. You're not supposed to sit there and be like, I'm a leader, I'm going to tell you what the hell to do. Don't worry about me. I worry about you. The rules are for you. The rules aren't for me. And getting back to your point too, you and I, when we discuss this, really hope that the auditor is doing it for good reason. We hope they're doing it to show the transparency. I'm hoping that when she was in the state Senate and she was in the state as a state rep, she saw some things and she's like, I need to fix it. That's what we need. Like, we could agree on everything else. I mean, disagree on everything else. But if she's going to do this, I'd back her. I'd back her all day.
The Senate leadership does seem pretty upset that she's moving forward with this. So given the way that it's played out, it's like, you know, it sounds like there could be some legitimacy behind that. So I'm interested to see what the end result is. Like, is this actually going to accumulate? Is this going to actually produce something tangible that's going to open our eyes, or we're going to, like, you know, find some things there that are really going to wow some people?
All right, I hope so. So let's play the next part where hearing from the leadership at the State House.
Response: the Senate president issued a statement saying, in part, Senate business is made public through journals, calendars, and recordings of each session, while payroll and other financial information is publicly available on the comptroller's website.
I just have to pause right here really quick. Knowing a lot of people in politics, trying to get involved in politics, this stuff might be out there, but most people aren't going to know where to find this. And that's a sad fact. And again, even if they are able to find this, figuring out what it means and how it affects them is different. And again, that's why I think this audit is probably needed, because they would take it and say, here's what we found. This is what it means to you. So let's listen a little longer.
And she pointed to an outside audit the Senate conducts every year. The most recent one available from 2020 is 6 pages long and is limited to finances.
So one other thing, I looked these things up. This is from Clifton Larson Allen. It's a 6-page audit. As they'll tell you, it's just about some numbers and some money. I have looked for the previous year's versions of this. They're all 6 pages long. They all basically say the same thing, and it's a whole bunch of nothing. So obviously, if you want to have the perception that you're doing an audit and you're doing the right things and everything's above board, oh, I did an audit. It's 6 pages. What's that 6 pages tell you? Well, the first 2 pages are like, this is how we did it, and this is why we did it. And then a couple things like, oh, this is how we looked. And then here's some numbers, and it means absolutely nothing. So that's why I'm for this audit. Let me just finish this out and let you talk, Jim.
Available funds and expenditures. State Auditor Diana DiZoglio responded to Senate President Spilka's statement, saying, in part, I hope legislative leaders will respect the taxpayers by cooperating with our office just as every other state entity does. No branch of our government, including the legislature, ought to be above the law.
Speaker Ron Mariano exclusively on OTR explaining why he's rejecting the state auditor's push to audit the House.
We've decided that she really doesn't have the authority that she's claiming in the letter that she sent us.
Just overstepping her authority here.
I believe so.
Why? Why do you think that is?
She won a statewide election, worked very hard, and thinks that uber powerful, that she can audit anything.
Uber powerful.
Yeah.
Auditor DiZoglio telling us, I find it disappointing the Speaker is fighting an audit of what's happening in the People's House, where the people's business is conducted using the people's money. We are not asking for permission and will continue conducting our audit as planned to help increase transparency, accountability, and equity for everyday families. She maintains the legislature was last audited by her office more than 100 years ago, but the House lawyer questions that, writing, we have no records of the Office of the State Auditor ever auditing the House of Representatives.
The most recent record we found was this audit of the Legislative Department from 1922. At that time, it included payments from the Senate President's compensation of $3,000 to traveling expenses, including cigars.
The auditor's office, as it's designed today, didn't exist that way.
Speaker Mariano says he's not ducking audits, adding one is done every year by an outside firm.
Do you think the law should be changed to allow?
No.
Why not?
No, because we operate independently, and we're judged on what we do. I don't need someone with a political agenda who's in the executive branch passing judgment on me.
Oh my gosh. Oh my God. Don't judge me politically. It's all politics, but don't judge me politically. I mean, I don't even know if they're aware of what they're saying. Do you?
Yeah, I mean, as we've covered, I mean, just based on what we've seen and some of the, I mean, we've been pretty new to a lot of this stuff, and just the poking around that we've done to in different campaigns and their financial reports. I mean, there's clearly enough out there of shady stuff going on that if you wanted to poke into it, I mean, you have groups setting up LLCs and transferring money over, and there's clearly enough that gets swept under the rug. So if you really wanted to, dig into that, there's enough there. I think the bigger question at this point is like, why is this being done? So it sounds like there's a potential backstory with DiZoglio and going after the legislature that I'm not, super familiar with.
Sure.
But either that or it's just to create a perception that they're actually doing something. So I think it's one of those two. As it develops, we'll find out a little bit more.
Now, I'm a pretty even keel guy, you know that, right? And he says something that's kind of true. And this is where I'm going to look into the camera, and it's incumbent upon us, right? Because what he's basically saying is people elect us. They keep electing us over and over. So we're just going to keep doing what we do. That's what has to change. Legit. That's what has to change. When are people going to realize that the people in power, if you keep putting them in power and they can do whatever they want, and this is how they treat you, are going to do whatever they want?
When was the that paper that they pulled up? It was like they must have had to go through they call it like the fiche paper. It's like this is like before computers were invented. They put everything on like fiche paper. You need like a microscope to find everything. That's what it looked like was when they pulled this last audit report.
And the best thing about it too, the ending just killed me of this guy. And again, listen, I don't need this to be political. The whole thing is political. At the beginning of the thing, they tell you who gets the conferences, who gets the offices, who gets to be on the committees, right? How do you think that's done? It's all political. But don't come here and tell me how to do my politics. I'm not telling you how to do your politics. What we're telling you is do the politics right. But the other problem is, like you said, it being almost a one-party state, they feel like they have carte blanche to do whatever they want. And I think what more and more people should do is, whether they like Republicans or not, or independents now, I'm not even telling you vote Republicans, vote Green Party, vote Libertarian. I don't care. But we have to start telling these people is we'll kick your butt out if you aren't working for us like you're supposed to. That's the dynamic that has to change, right? And I hope this audit goes through, because whether there's something on it or there's nothing on it, having that over their head all the time, like, hey, listen, people are watching you, and you better do the right thing because you're elected to do the right thing. I like that. It's sad we have to be that way, right? Like you would hope that you could vote for a person and they go, I'm going up there to do my job for you. But they're like, I'm going up there and whatever they tell me to do, I'm going to do because I want to get on a committee. So I just need people to think. We need people to start looking at this whole situation differently, and we need to hold our elected officials to account. So what do you got to say, Jim?
Yeah, I agree. I think the audit's a good thing to happen as well. I hope it moves forward, and I mean, if it is legitimate, if they actually do pursue it and
Sure.
are trying to create transparency and good faith, then not only is that good, but I mean, I'm sure Desoglio is looking at it as well, and I mean, I think it's a potentially a good move for her political career as well, because
Sure.
it is widely popular for people to make things more transparent, and it's not. This isn't the first time that it's been done. Other politicians have done this in other states, and it's worked
Correct.
out well for them. So, like Nikki Haley, for example, this was one of the big issues. She was in the state legislature before she ran for governor, and one of the big issues that she ran on, I think it was called like the Sunshine Act or the Sunshine Laws,
Yep.
where it was making the vote counts or the
Committee counts.
yeah, making them transparent and publicly available, because a lot of that stuff was hidden and behind closed doors, and she really campaigned on that, and that was one of the big things that she ran on that led to her becoming governor. So this has worked out for politicians in the past, so I think it could be a win for the people, and for good or for better or for worse, it could be a win for Desoglio's
Yeah.
campaign as well.
So let's finish this up with someone that has some common sense from a organization, a nonprofit organization. So we'll see what they say.
But those fighting to make state government more transparent made their reaction clear.
Thrilled. This audit is welcome and really timely.
And long overdue, according to Act on Mass Executive Director Erin Leahy. Especially, she says, with the Massachusetts Senate recently voting to remove term limits for its president, and the House continuing to keep all committee votes out of public view.
The truth of the matter is only a few people in the State House are deciding which bills will pass and which bills will not pass. When just a few people have all the power of...
Okay. Only a few people are making that decision. That's not how this is supposed to work, right? Let's just finish this out for a second.
Of what passes and what doesn't pass, that disempowers the rest of us. And that should trouble everyone that cares about democracy.
100%. If you care about democracy, if you care about the process working, then you want this audit. And you probably want to audit every year. And you probably want a really good independent audit that isn't getting bribed, they're, transparent and people know what's going on. They want to know when you're spending over $600 on PayPal or Venmo, but they're spending multi-billion dollars and they're like, you have no right to see how we're spending your money.
Yeah, exactly. This is where those 87,000 IRS agents come into play. We talk about this. There's not that many billionaires in the United States, so clearly they're not just going after billionaires. They're going to have to be going after regular citizens if they're going to be hiring that many IRS agents.
Sure.
But you brought up another good point too, because we've talked about this before. If you go to the state website, and you can actually go see all the bills that have been proposed.
Correct.
And we've poked at some of these bills, and they're like absolutely absurd. It's like any new building needs to have solar panels, or like every autonomous car has to be electric. Like they're proposing some pretty radical bills.
Yes.
And some of them, it's like you don't get to see who's necessarily if they do go to a vote, who's voting on them. So it's like I want to learn more about who's voting in favor or against these bills, because I want to.
Yeah. Let me show you a couple other things. I put up a slideshow for people, and for people that might listen to this in their cars or on a podcast, I'm going to pull up a slideshow and just a couple pictures and a couple things for an explanation. So first one is I have a picture of the 1922 audit book that they had. So they've been done in the past. Like I said, stay tuned next week. We're going to watch next week's show because we have breaking news that there's actually been more audits they found, but we'll get that information for you next week. Then what we have is we'll even show you some pictures inside of the book just to show you what they spent money on, right? Spend it on cigars, how much the speakers were paid, how much representatives were paid. But here's one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this story. A, I want an audit, and B, like I said earlier, when I was running a race, okay, one of the topics I brought up was my opponent voted against transparency in government every chance she had. Now, on election day, she yelled at all my people from what they told me, saying those are all lies. But what I present to everybody right here is from Mass Fiscal, which is a conservative website that tracks the voting of representatives in Massachusetts, and also Progressive Massachusetts, which is a progressive website. It's called Progressive Mass Scorecard. What I did is I found the bills from last year's 192nd General Council that were either downvoted or upvoted, and these were to allow transparency in government. And very rarely, if you look up both these websites, Progressive Mask Scorecard and Mask Fiscal, will they agree on a stance? Okay, so if you see in the top right-hand corner says Mass Fiscal Stance a check, that means yes, they wanted you to have a yes. And Progressive Position at the bottom says yes, they wanted them to say yes. Well, my opponent voted no, as well as the rest of the legislature. And on this particular vote, it was on publishing full committee votes online, as opposed to publishing only no votes and tallies for all House committees so that their constituents can see how their representatives are voting. Committees decided whether the bill advances to the floor. So my representative voted no to transparency. So we'll go to the next one. This one was for a review period for bills. This vote was requiring bills to be released 48 hours before a vote so that representatives and the public have had time to read the legislation. So the conservative website that tracks these things said yes. The progressive said yes, that's a great idea. My opponent and the legislature said no. Right? So we see some sort of little trend going on here. And finally, public committee votes and testimony. This was a vote on reforming the joint House-Senate rules to publish full committee votes online, as opposed to publishing only no votes and tallies and making the committee testimony available as public record in order to make the legislative process more accessible to the public. So they want to make it more accessible to the public. That's what the bill was. The Mask Fiscal conservative people said, yes, we should do that. The progressive said, yes, we should do that. Your representative said, wah, wah, no. And then we're going to have an audit. And what do they say? No. So go ahead. I just want to say one thing as I do this, and then I'll let you talk. I hope people are starting to realize, like, the things we bring up is our system is broken right now. We have elected people to represent us, and they're not doing it. They're representing either themselves, special interest, or the party. And nothing is going to change until we make them change. They're actively sitting here saying, we don't want you to see what we're doing. We don't care if you see what we're doing. Maybe you're too dumb, they think. Maybe they don't care about what you think. But I think it's time to really start holding them to account. I think people should take a more active participation in the government. Watch this show. We're going to be putting up bills. We're going to be talking about a bill in a second that could be going through a committee and hopefully not be voted on. But we need to be more active. We need to pay attention. Sunlight's the best disinfectant, and boy, they don't like it. What do you say, Jim?
It's the Nancy Pelosi rule. You have to pass the bill before you find out what's in it.
Yeah.
Is that a famous? What was that? Was that the Affordable Health Care Act? That was their famous quote?
This is actually worse. This is actually worse because they don't want you to see what's in it. This is, we're going to pass the bill and screw you. You're not going to see what's in it.
Yeah.
I
love in that book. So they were going through, what was it, 1922, and they were looking at all the expenses. They found cigars. But I'm like, in my head, I'm like, times have changed a lot since 1922. Not a lot of politicians, definitely not a lot of Democrat politicians smoke cigars these days. So no. I'm wondering if this audit, as this audit comes up, I'm like, I wonder what we should do a poll question. What sort of expenses are we going to see come out of this audit? Is it going to be vape pens? Is it going to be something else? Your opponent was buying paddles for her campaign. So
I know.
Who knows?
I know. So, like I said to everyone, watch our show next week. There was some breaking news that came out today. We didn't have time to get everything uploaded in the new videos. And it's a developing story, and it's something I think we're going to follow because I think everyone should agree that there should be more transparency. There should probably be pressure on our representatives to put pressure on the people in the state house to say, let this go through. And let's just see where the chips may fall.